Hello, everyone. Brian Mittman here with the Disability Guys, Markoff and Mittman, and I am pleased to have today with me a dear friend and colleague, Brad Glassman. Welcome, Brad.
Thanks, Brian. How you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. So as part of trying to continue to provide really useful and helpful information to people, whether it's related to work injuries or just related to life in general, and especially since a lot of us have time these days, being in a stay from home type of work from home type of situation, we're recording a series of webinars and informational topics to help people out in general. So Brad is with me today, and today our topic is going to be about immigration. It has been a hot button topic for many years, but I personally think it's pretty misunderstood, and getting little quick snippets on the news is never very helpful. And Brad, who has been practicing for over, 25 years like myself, has a very, very strong background in the world of immigration. And aside from that, it's my understanding he also has a real love of classic cars, and other than me driving fast, I guess we have some things in common. So welcome, Brad.
Thanks so much, Brian. Appreciate you having me.
My pleasure to have you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started, so people know who they're talking with? And
Sure. My name's Brad Glassman. I'm an immigration attorney, as Brian said, for over 25 years. Westchester native, now residing in Long Island with offices in Manhattan, and access to any of the tri-state area or nationwide as well. I graduated Pace University Law School in 1995. Prior to that, I attended University of Pennsylvania and just started practicing immigration law through my family. My dad's done it for 50 years. And growing up with immigration law and cultures, it just fascinated me.
Wow. And your dad did it, so it's in your blood, right?
It's in my blood.
Aside from actually being an immigrant yourself, I'm sure,
Right, yes.
child or grandchild of immigrants like myself.
Yeah, and I was one of three that chose to be a lawyer, so it's in my blood in that regard.
Very nice. So, before we start, let's kind of clear some things up. In your own mind, what is immigration? What does that mean, or what should it really mean?
Well, immigration has so many phases to it, but in a nutshell, immigration is the right to come to America, to visit, work legally, and in many cases, live here permanently as a green card holder, and eventually become a U.S. citizen if one chooses.
And why do you think, based on your experience, why do you think that so many people want to come here to the U.S.? I mean, I know it's a softball answer, but
yeah, it's a cliche. It's a cliche, but it really is the greatest country in the world, land of opportunity. And people just love the freedoms: freedom of religion, freedom to speak, freedom to start your own business, go work for someone, and help support your family and make a better life for yourself.
All right, excellent. So let me just kind of jump right into a topic. Let's talk about this thing that we hear about called green cards. And I know there's a whole bunch of different facets to that particular diamond, but let's just jump into what is a green card? What does it mean? Is it really green? And then we can talk about specifics.
Okay, great. I guess sometime in the 1920s or 30s, it really was green. Today, it's closer to green than it's ever been since my practice. There's been some beige versions, some pink versions, but today it's greenish with a little bit of beige in it. And basically a green card is just the right to lawfully live in America. The proper term is a lawful permanent resident card, but everyone's called it a green card colloquially since, like I said, the 20s or 30s. And that document allows you to stay here permanently, work, pay taxes, and become a member of society, short of some rights that you have as a citizen, such as voting.
Okay, so it's almost like it's the right to live here and permanently, and it's an interim step, though, to becoming a citizen eventually. Is that correct?
Yes, in order to become a U.S. citizen, in most cases, you need to have actually had a green card for a certain amount of years before you can even make the application for U.S. citizenship. For instance, if you obtain a green card through any facet except marriage to a citizen, you have to wait at least 5 years to apply for U.S. citizenship. Marriage to an American allows you to make the application for citizenship within 3 years.
Okay, so but it's a necessary step before anything else.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and is there a limit on the number of green cards that the United States issues?
Yes,
General?
Yes, in general, green cards are limited by category, depending on how many people are applying for them. It's a supply and demand. Different categories are allowed certain amount of green cards. Different countries are set at certain amount of green cards, so it's supposed to be equitable. Certain green cards are unlimited. For instance, again, marriage to an American, it's deemed what's called an immediate relative, and you are not bound by figures and visa quotas.
Interesting. And how long does, aside from the initial wait, right, whether it's the 3 years or the 5 years, how long does the process take?
Well, in order to get a green card before we even get to the 3 or 5 year for citizenship, that's a loaded question too, Ryan. In today's world, if I went back 25 years, my answer would be different. 10 years would be different. There's been ebbs and flows of timing. Nowadays, even before the pandemic, everything slowed down, especially under this administration. Everything takes longer. But for instance, if you were applying for a green card today through marriage to an American living in the New York tri-state area, although Connecticut would be a little quicker, New York, New Jersey, slower, it usually takes approximately 11 to 14 months to have an interview for your green card to prove that you're really married to an American. That timeline just gets longer.
So you, let's say, marry an American or do whatever that is, and you apply, however long that takes, and then there's that 11 to 14 months or longer for this interview. And then usually how long does it take after the interview to be approved?
Once you go through the interview, you can tell, at least I can with 25 years experience, how well the interview went. And if everything went well, background checks and so forth, most clients obtain their green cards physically in the mail within 2 weeks. Okay. So a lot of waiting in advance, and then you get the card 2 weeks later.
Right. And can you live here before applying for a green card?
In many instances, in most, you can, provided you enter the United States legally and married an American, you can stay here legally until you have your green card in your hand. Other situations where people may have entered illegally, then it's a different story. We could spend hours on that alone.
So at least on the legal entry side, you're a college kid and you come here to study from abroad and you have a visa to be here to study is how it works. Yeah. And you decide, oh, you know what, I'm here legally, whether you've overstayed your visa or not, I want to apply for a green card because I've been, for whatever the reason is.
Right, yes. Through marriage, yes, you can be illegal, overstay, 5 years, 10 years. If you marry an American, then you'd be able to what's called adjust your status and obtain your green card here. Other avenues, if you overstay your visa by even more than 180 days, and you're sponsored a different method to obtain a green card, then it's a situation that would most likely not allow you to stay here during that process. You'd have to leave, wait abroad.
And if you're here under a visa and you remain here legally under a visa and you apply, then you're perfectly fine other than the process.
Right. Status is everything in today's world. Trying to remain in status, not overstay, not come in illegally or violate the terms of your visa, then best way to try to adjust yourself and obtain a green card.
So, you mentioned marriage, but I know besides marriage, there's also this idea of employment. You hear a lot about different types of visas to get people here, and then eventually different types of, sponsorship, as you said, right? Somebody who's sponsoring you to come here, stay here, become a permanent resident with a green card. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure thing. Outside of the family-based green cards, and I keep using the marriage, but there are still family-based green cards through parents that are Americans, brothers and sisters, and so forth. Moving from that realm to the employment-based prong of immigration, employers are able to sponsor workers to try to obtain green cards. Again, assuming someone's here legally working on a visa, whether it's for that employer or not, the employer could make an application called a labor certification application to try to show that through a good faith recruitment campaign of advertising and so forth, they cannot find an American to do the job that they're sponsoring you for. And then that process goes on, and eventually, if everything's approved, you can obtain your permanent residence that way.
So what would you say are maybe the top 3 types of businesses that are looking for labor that they have to really get folks from abroad because they just can't find them here in the States?
IT companies. You hear a lot about times, a lot of our IT professionals come from, I don't know, India, Russia, China. America is a little bit slow in turning out our own students to that effect. Getting much better now, certainly over the last 25 years, but IT companies always need sponsorships and specific employees. In fact, some of the largest groups of visa holders are for Apple, Google, and some of the large IT firms. Real estate companies and construction and so forth often need visas, especially for people that are hand laborers, whether it's a carpenter or a plumber or so forth. And general businesses, anything from a Fortune 500 down, depending on the position that they're seeking to sponsor, it could be any company.
Right. And do you represent individuals? Do you represent businesses trying to get individuals? How does that all work?
Well, immigration's funny in that way. There's dual representation most of the time. A lot of times I represent the business and also the individual. As long as the company's comfortable with that, I can do it that way. That's allowed in immigration law. There are instances where, a company will have me as an attorney and the applicant may have their own attorney. That sometimes gets a little funky with the businesses because they want a little bit more control.
Right. And folks that are coming here to work, a lot of those types of people will come here on, these, what we hear they call work visas, or their work visas. Now, is that something an individual gets, or do you have to go through this, the employment side, or is that only to get an actual green card?
There are some work visas where you can, if you will, self-petition. Very few of them. Most of the work visas require sponsorship through a company. Very common is something called an H-1B visa for professionals. They'll come here or finish graduate school in America and then be sponsored for an H-1B visa through the company. And these visas are company specific. So if company A sponsors you and you want to switch to company B, that's fine. But now company B has to start its own application and can't usually just take over your application.
Huh. Interesting. Well, I guess that helps the company who spent the time and resources to recruit you.
Right. And another thing is on visas, green cards through employment, the company is actually required to pay. So there's a large investment in working through a company for sponsorship. It could take years, depending on your nationality and how long the case takes, before you could conceivably become a free agent and work for anybody else.
Huh, really interesting. And have you had any, kind of coming back to the realm of the disability guys, have you had any immigration situations with employment related either visas or applications where the individual has been, seriously injured and may not be able to continue working, but was here and applying? How does something like that work?
Yeah, it's tricky in that regard, because if you are working on a visa and for some reason you can't work, that visa is tied to your ability to work. So there are instances where you can fall out of status, unfortunately, from an immigration point of view, yet, from your point of view in a disability situation, you're still legal to make applications for disability, unemployment, lawsuits, and so forth, although your immigration status may suffer.
Yeah, that's interesting because at least in New York, if you have a workers' compensation claim, your quote alien status is how it's written in the law since it goes back to the early 1900s, never mattered. The idea was, hey, if you're here working, you're working, and we're not going to let an employer get away with not having insurance for you for a work injury. But it doesn't obviously affect your rights, which are completely different on that side about whether it's a visa or an application through the green card.
Right. Your rights that you protect, 100% legal. On my end, sometimes I'm at the opposite end of the table where my concern is, well, you're legal to do that, lawsuit, disability, but now we have to worry about trying to keep you in status. Those that are not in status now, it really doesn't make a difference because you may not be able to keep them in status. They're already out of status. And in your instance, like you said, it will not affect your ability to, pursue your rights.
And before we started recording today, we were talking about some of the changes that came down the pike, and there's a new form that immigration through the current administration is requiring that I hear is a real bear. And what is that, and what's the purpose of that?
Sure. Recently, the Supreme Court upheld the president's edict that the government wants to be able to prove that when you come to America or work here, you do not become a public charge. Public charge, in essence, mean a ward of the state. You're going to seek things like Medicaid, long-term, or Social Security, or certain benefits that you may not be entitled to without being a permanent resident or a citizen. So now there's an application that has to include the application for residency that's quite burdensome, seeks piles of financial documentation, background information that was never required before until the end of February 2020.
So that form, though, that's for folks that are applying to get a permanent residency, to apply for a green card.
Yes, that form is geared just towards green cards. But if you're applying for a visa, there are new attestations which confirm under perjury that you won't become a public charge.
Okay, so basically, if you're trying to get here with legal documents, you basically have to swear or affirm that you're not going to be seeking any type of welfare or state aid or federal aid, stuff like that.
Yes, besides affirming that, you now have to actually prove it through documentation, such as tax returns, payroll records, even educational documents. They're looking at your background to see even your age. Hey, is this person a college graduate? Well, yeah, if they are, maybe they have a better chance of obtaining, gainful employment. Are they retired? Well, if they're retired, there's a chance they may want to dip into the certain funds that Americans are entitled to.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because I'm thinking about it just from a disability perspective. There's a lot of folks that have quote unquote a disability but can be very active and have a lot of ability in life. But I'm wondering how immigration is going to look at that to say, oh, why is this guy coming over who uses a air-assisted wheelchair? What's going on here? Really fascinating and unfortunate stuff to a certain extent. And then for folks that are already permanent residents and they have their green cards and they're applying for citizenship, I assume that's not really the not
yet at least, right? Not yet at least. Although when you do apply for citizenship, you do have to prove that you paid your taxes in America, on worldwide income, if you were obligated to pay taxes. So there's usually a 5-year back check. They want to see your last 5 years tax returns or proof that you pay.
Right. Yeah, pretty fascinating stuff. Well, I appreciate the input and the insight about what a green card really is, and that it might actually be somewhat green. How can somebody get in touch with you if they want to find out more?
Sure. Easy to access me through email, brad@glassmanlaw.com, or my office number, which right now is not in use. The office, that is, 212-675-3710. And I offer my cell to anyone, 914-582-1768, 914-582-1768.
And if anybody has any questions, you can always contact us either in the response section here in the webinar, on our Facebook, our Instagram, Twitter, or our website, or info@thedisabilityguys.com. So Brad, thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. Can I add one thing?
Sure.
Sure. Just so clients know, every case is different. Be careful what you hear from other people claiming to be experts, or, oh, my friend, my cousin had this happen. Every fact pattern is different, as you know, in disability as well. So don't be bashful to explain your particular situation to an attorney, and always be honest, because we can't help you if I don't have all the facts.
Right. Thank you. That's excellent advice. And as I always tell people, even though your neighbor, your friend, or whomever had a certain outcome, everything is based on you, the facts about who you are, and things that you do. So do your research beforehand, and feel free to give us a shout.
Thanks again, Brian.